Yep. Those are great answers. So I have more I could ask, but I want to give you a chance. So do people have questions? And there are, actually, can you go, there's a microphone on that side and a microphone over here, and then everybody in the room can hear you. If you could start by saying, you can go ahead, yeah, okay. Whoever, but you can stand behind that person if you'd like. And then as you ask questions, if you could start by saying who you are, and then hopefully ask brief questions that really are questions for our distinguished guests.
Thank you so much. My name is Nabila. I'm from Kuwait. I'm a mid-career at HKS, and I just want to ask a very small and big question at the same time. Who wrote, "When they go low, we go high"?
That was the First Lady of the United States, Michelle Obama. That was her line. My only role in that line was typing it into the computer. All her.
Thank you. Let's go over here.
Hi, my name is Aliwan. I'm a second-year MPP student here at HKS. Two quick questions. The first is, when you, in retrospect, what's one thing or one lesson that you wish somebody would have told you when you were finishing up graduate school as you embarked on your career? And then the second question is, as you reflect on the different experiences and positions that you've had, have you found that on balance it's been more useful to present yourself as someone who has a particular area of expertise, whether topical or regional, or somebody who has an eclectic set of skills that are sort of transferable from one position or one environment to another?
So on the first question, I suspect, actually I know because we've talked about it before, that Sarah agrees with this. I wish I had known how important writing was. It turns out it was something that I cared about, valued, you know, and had some aptitude for at least, and then went into writing before I went into government. But it is incredibly important to be able to convey your ideas on paper. I mean, the bureaucracy functions on paperwork, and you don't often have the ability to present, you know, in face-to-face with very senior people, so you got to write a very good memo. And it shocks me to some extent how important that is, and how infrequently, you know, people have the ability to really do that at the level that they can think. So that's one thing. And sorry, your second question, remind me?
Or is this that when you look back on the different positions that you've had, has it been on balance more useful for you to present yourself area of expertise versus a set of skills?
This is sort of a hard answer. I actually think it's easier to get in the government as an expert, you know, applying for a particular position and having the aptitude for that position. But I actually think, frankly, it's easier to sort of move up the ladder into more senior jobs if you have flexibility and some ability to convey that you're a generalist. In the end, the people at the very top, I think more often than not, tend to be generalists, but at different points in their career, they were probably experts. So it's not a satisfying answer, but in some level, you got to be able to do both.
So I'm not really an expert in anything, so it's sort of hard for me to answer that question, but I like your question about what I wish I had known. You know, it's a cliche for people to say take risks, but I just can't emphasize enough the importance of it. Politics, it's not like med school where it's like, you know, you kind of have a pretty defined path for how you do things. You know, this is about, I remember when I was a third year in law school and my friend Josh Gottheimer is telling me to move to Arkansas, get an apartment and car, and then fly back in December for exams. Like, this is kind of a risk. And you know, it scared me. All I could see was the downside of doing that, such as being expelled from law school. Like, this just didn't seem, this seemed very risky, very dangerous. It's easy to focus on the downside of the new and unfamiliar opportunity. But once I was able to think about, like, okay, what if I don't take this risk? What will happen? I realized, like, I'll stay at law school, which is like, you know, not my greatest passion. I'll probably go to a law firm. I'll probably kind of continue on a path that I don't even want to be on. And once I was actually able to think clearly about the downside of the safe option, it became clear to me that actually the safe option was the real risk and the risk was the safe option. So I think it's really important to think very clearly about the risks of the safe option. We don't do that. We get kind of scared about this new thing, but I think that's key to making good decisions about your political career.
And can I just add my own answers to those questions? On writing, we actually were talking this afternoon at the Faculty Steering Committee meeting about whether we are teaching the Kenyon School students enough about how to write policy analyses well, because it is incredibly hard to do and incredibly important to do. And I think I have my own experience in government echoes theirs, which is people are not good at it, and that really holds them back. The most important thing I can do is I learn how to write, notwithstanding the fact I also do math. It's the writing that mostly matters. And the other thing I would say is, I think the thing you should do when you're making career choices is the thing that most excites you. Not staying in a law school or focusing on a law school you don't really want to be in. I'm not trying to get anybody to drop out of law school. but to do the thing that really excites you. Because first of all, like, it's hard to predict what's going to pay off later in your career, so at least you're enjoying it while you do it, but also I think you're so much better at a thing that excites you. Totally. You'll do so much better job at it. That will open doors. It may not be quite the doors you had in mind to start with. I do the thing that really, really gets you up in the morning and keeps you up at night. Up here.
Hi, my name is Katie Dolan. I'm a junior at the college. You've both been in the administration a long time. What is your perspective on sort of a key problem that we face, which is that we sort of need our best people in government, but our best people might be able to find better life circumstances or better compensation or anything like that in sectors outside of the government. So how do you think we'll square that in the coming, years in our democracy, I guess?
Well, look, I mean, I don't think that's a new problem. How to attract the most talented people into public service is something I think that places like this and the government itself have been thinking about for quite a long time. I actually think, it shouldn't be a hard sell, right? You have the ability in government to do incredible things at a young age, sometimes even with very limited experience, that there is no other forum to have that sort of impact on society. And I think the key, frankly, is for people like us and others who have had the experience to be able to go out and explain, what exactly, in places like this, on other campuses, what exactly it is possible to do. The other thing is, and don't take, I think this still answers your question, I don't consider government to be the only form of public service. I sort of alluded to that in my previous answer. I have a broad definition. You can do public service at NGOs. You can do public service, frankly, as I think a writer, thinker, journalist. You can certainly do public service in the government. I actually think in the private sector, you can do public service in your time, maybe that's outside of your core mission. And then there are plenty of private sector entities that, by virtue of what they're doing or creating in the world, are a public service. So I think broadening your definition a bit, and just making sure that believing what you are working on day in, day out is contributing in a way that is meaningful to you, I think is also important.
Yeah, I really agree with what Jon said.
Over here.
These are always so high. Hi, my name's Amanda. I'm a freshman at the college. And I was interested because both of you mentioned kind of your support network and tapping into that in this transition phase. And I'm definitely not anywhere near this point in my career, but for a lot of people and undergraduates in the college, this transition phase and this kind of shift of the political climate leaves us very uncertain of steps to take forward. So I was interested in what is going on in your head in those conversations and in those questions you have with your support group when you're trying to make a decision. What are the things that come to your mind? What are the questions that you ask from your mentors to try to make sure that this decision will really benefit you?
That's a great question. I often ask people, do you think this is a good use of my skills? Do you think that this is an environment where I can really contribute, or do you think that my voice actually won't really be heard here? I'll also say, do you think this is a place where that can be a good stepping stone to something else? I'll say, is this job committing me to a path that maybe is longer term than I want to be committed to? A really important question is when looking at a job or an opportunity, I'm very concerned about the people who I will be working for and with. And I'm going to do some real kind of background research on them. I'm going to call and ask around, have you ever worked with so-and-so? What's your experience? Is this person a supportive colleague? Are they a good team player? Are they pleasant to work with? Do you trust them? Are they people of integrity? I actually think a number one question you should be asking about people who you might be working with, are they people of integrity? That can have a really big impact on your experience there. I think the people you work with and for are so important. And I also just think, you need to work for people who you believe in. I think a question I often get asked about speechwriting that always baffles me is people say, what happens when you disagree with the person you work for? And I'm like, I don't. I mean, I can't imagine writing speeches for someone with whom I disagree. That just seems bizarre to me. I don't write speeches just to engage in the process of writing. I do it because there are certain causes I care deeply about, and I'm going to work for someone who I think can effectively promote those causes. So I think the question is, does this opportunity give you a chance to promote causes you care deeply about?
I'm a big proponent in getting advice, and I think it's critically important, but one thing I've come to believe about it is that people do tend to advise you along a path that they themselves have taken. And so I think it's actually important when consulting with other people for advice to talk to people who have done it, frankly, differently, whatever the it is in terms of your question, because if there is a bias, people do tend to see their own route as being preferable. So that's one thing that I have always tried to do.
Yeah, and I crowdsource my advice. I never ask one person about a decision. I make a lot of phone calls, a lot of emails, and then you start to see trends, and you start to kind of get a sense of a core truth that kind of emerges from the crowd.
Thank you. Over here.
I was going to say, I think I have the opposite problem of the young lady over there. My name is John. I'm a MPP2 here at the Kennedy School, and one of the first things that strikes me when I was in Washington was the amount of lawyers there. And both of you have law school degrees, and we're here in the Kennedy School of Government. So my question is a law degree necessary for a career in government on the level that maybe you or your colleagues have had? Or is it more of just a signal to show people that you are competent and smart and can think and write well?
There are certainly jobs in the government for which a law degree is a requirement. You know, if you want to be on the Hill and be one of the council jobs, these are really really substantive, very just terrific jobs to have. You're really at the heart of the action, making policy, and you need a law degree for them. If you're going to be counsel to a Senate committee, in the White House, there are certain, if you want to be in the White House counsel's office, that's a critical thing to have a law degree. I do think it serves as a signal that you are smart and competent. I mean, I think, especially I'll tell you as a speechwriter, people are much less likely to try to roll me knowing that I have a law degree, because they kind of know when they're coming at me with you need to put in these 18 points, it's like I'm a lawyer and I'm going to kind of come right back at them. So I think it is a signal. I mean, was it relevant to my daily life as a speechwriter? No, it wasn't. I can't really think of a lot of times that I use my degree, but I'm really glad I have it. It gives me tremendous flexibility. I think that's the great thing about a law degree is, if you're working in government and you decide, okay, I need to do some time in private practice for whatever reason, you can always go back in. It's a good way to kind of have a solid career path if you just need a break from government. And I think it does give you some general sense of respect. Is it necessary? No, for most jobs, probably not.
So I guess I would start with where Sarah ended. The short answer is no, it's not necessary. But the longer answer is it's, I guess, complicated, because there's got to be some reason why, in this administration at least, the president, the vice president, the secretary of state, the most recent deputy secretary of state, one of the 3 or 4 national security advisors, and any number of other senior officials, if you went around the departments and agencies, have this degree. And it's not, I don't think, purely because they were indecisive about what they wanted to do when they were in their 20s and decided to go to law school. I think there is an element of it that is helpful, but necessary? Certainly not. 8 or 10 years ago, everybody was saying in the George W. Bush administration era, oh, is the MBA now what everybody needs to get to go into government, because the president, his chief of staff, various other senior officials had that degree. I think this is actually a decision that should not be made on that basis at all. If you like the idea of law school or think that you might want to be a lawyer, you should go to law school. If you don't do it because you want to be the Secretary of State.
We'll say Tom Perez, who was the Secretary of Labor most recently, has a degree from the law school and the Kennedy School. And the story is told to me, although I was not there to hear it, that he said once that a few things that he used in his jobs in the government at different levels came from the law school, and a much larger number came from the Kennedy School. That story was told to me here. It's possible the story is remembered differently up in Langdale Hall. But that's the way I've heard the story. But I think it is consistent with the view that there are things, for certain things you want to do, if you're trying to write regulations that will legally compel employers to do certain things, it may be helpful to understand the law of that. But there are also a lot of things that one can use in jobs in the government and other forms of public service that one will learn here more than at the law school. Up there.
Hi, my name's Philip, and I'm a sophomore at the college. Both of you talked about the importance of public service, but that's become a little bit of a charged term maybe in today's hyper-partisan atmosphere. So as political appointees in a Democratic administration, would you consider somebody who's a speechwriter or a political appointee for Donald Trump to be a public servant?
I mean, to speak for myself, sure. I don't find that to be a hard question. Whether I agree with what they are channeling their public service toward, I think, is a different question from whether I believe their day-to-day existence and job is in the category of public service. I'm unequivocal about that.
Yeah, that's interesting. Are they I mean, I guess it depends on what your definition of public servant is. I mean, I think, if you really want to narrow it, to define it very strictly are they serving the public good? I mean, are they public servants? Yes, technically I think they fit that job. If you're asking, are they serving the public good? I have trouble saying yes to that question, seeing what's happened so far in this administration, just to be totally honest. But I agree with John that technically they are public servants.
Yes.
Hi, Austin Federa. So candidate Obama's 2008 speech about Reverend Wright and probably Michelle Obama's speech at the DNC in 2016 are like the two most well-publicized speeches of probably the last 20 years, I'd say, especially the ones that I can remember as being alive for. Both of those speeches are distinctly different from many other kinds of political speeches, and in some ways the Obamas changed the tenor of how politicians talk. Part of this is probably they are, in many respects, the first non-white politicians to hold those offices. When you are a speechwriter and you are trying to write intimate experiences of race in the United States about something that you may not have a common experience with, I mean, the word that speechwriters use all the time is it's a very intimate experience. How do you build that with people who are probably the two people who have the least amount of time of anyone else on the planet to actually get to know you and to put in that sort of effort at building that relationship? And I guess this is also a question, when you're dealing with someone like John Kerry, that's the same experience. You have to be implicitly trusted, and that's something that you don't have the luxury of having necessarily months and months to build. How does that work?
Yeah, I mean, I think, I think the best, I've written about this previously, I think the best advice that I can give about speechwriting is just to say something true. I think people often, they're worried about saying something smart or witty or that will make them seem powerful or that they think people want to hear, but the real core is to say something true. And so when you're a speechwriter, what I'm really trying to discern at any given moment with my principal is like, what is most fundamentally true for you at this moment? And that is, it's a matter of time. And that's something that speechwriters often have to fight for, right? They're always trying to get time on the principal's schedule, and do you have time? And I think, it was a lot easier, it's actually a lot easier for me working for a first lady because, she had more time in her schedule. No one, if there's a market crash or a crisis, no one is running to the first lady, right? They're running to the president. So her schedule is a little bit more fluid, and I think she and her staff really understood the value of that time. And so it was a matter of kind of not just getting her ideas, but also just a constant process over years of getting feedback. So, I spent a lot of time with her just discussing speeches where she would tell me in no uncertain terms, like, okay, this part works, but this part doesn't, and here's why, and here's how this really isn't reflecting my truth at this moment. Here is my truth at this moment. And over time, you really start to hear people's voice in your head. So it became kind of a real-time process where as I write, I would actually hear her voice, and I'd be writing something, and I'd hear her saying, this translation is clumsy, or this part feels loose, or like, this is a bunch of policy jargon, but it's not telling a real story about people. You gotta, make that fresh. So I think that just amount of there's no substitute for spending time, just none.
So I think you can get, 80% of the way there as a speechwriter or any other kind of a staffer for someone by knowing your brief and knowing your principal. But I also think that last bit that takes you from being, sort of very good to being better than very good is the ability to tell them when you think they're wrong and why you think they're wrong. And you're not going to win those arguments very often. In fact, some principals you might never win those arguments. But I do think you owe them the ability to say, actually, no, I would not do this way, or I would not say this thing, and here's why. That is a hard thing to do when you're a young person and not a famous person, and they're somebody who's been at this longer and been very successful and really know what they're doing. But if they're not getting that, I don't think they're getting the best staffing that they can get.
Thank you. Here.
Hi, I'm Nadine Corey. I'm a freshman at the college. This is a question for Ms. Hurwitz. You've written for both Hillary Clinton and Michelle Obama. One was known for being very honest, always saying what was on her mind, and the other was known for, she had numbers that were infamously indicative of a lack of honesty and trustworthiness. I was wondering, as someone who's written for both, did you encounter that discrepancy, and if so, how?
So I'd take issue with the idea that Hillary Clinton was dishonest. She's really one of the most honest people I know. I mean, I think that, you know, the Hillary that I saw in 2008 and 2016 was someone who was just speaking her truth on a daily basis. She spoke it proudly, she spoke it, and maybe it wasn't, she actually said in her convention speech, which I thought was very moving, she said, you know, I've been in public service, and for me, the service part of that is comfortable, the public part of that is less comfortable. So I think she would admit that maybe she didn't do it in as, you know, and maybe she wasn't the world's best politician, maybe she wasn't the world's best show woman or stage person, you know, maybe, but I never saw her, you know, her level of honesty to me was as high as Michelle Obama's, so that's not a contrast that I ever saw. You know, they're two very different women. You know, they have very different roles as, you know, a Secretary of State, as a candidate for president, than as a First Lady, so I think that their two styles kind of reflect the requirements of those roles, and also just their personalities. Like I often kind of feel uncomfortable when people ask me to compare people I've written for. It's like comparing your two children. You know, I love them both. I respect and admire them both. They're very different, and I can't sort of, you know, compare one to the other. So, I mean, I will tell you that I think they are both incredibly honest people. They are both just incredibly committed public servants. I mean, everything I saw for both of them was just reflected this incredible passion for helping others. And I think, you know, you look at both of them, if you trace their biographies back to when they were practically teenagers, they were engaging in public service of some type. So this is kind of in their DNA. It's kind of a lifetime thing, and that's really what attracted me to work for both of them.
It's your turn. I think you may have the last question.
Hi, my name is Claudia. I'm from Hong Kong, and I'm a first-year MPP student at the Kennedy School. So both of you have had very impressive careers. If you wouldn't mind, could you please share what you have in mind as for future plans, whether they are concrete plans or aspirations?
If you were a senior, then you would know not to ask that question right at this time.
Well, I mean, it's both a hard and easy question for me. I mean, the real answer is I just don't know. I'm, you know, sort of exploring all of this in real time. As I said, you know, it's hard to look for a job when you have a job, especially if you have a sort of all-consuming job. So I may have a better answer for you in a couple months. I hope I do. But right now, I just don't have much to say.
Yeah, I don't have a lot in the way of specifics either, to be honest. I'm kind of enjoying not having a full-time job. There's something really delightful about controlling your own time and kind of working on various projects that come up and are interesting. I think I'll always be doing something in the realm of politics or public service, whether full or part-time. I can't really envision a life for myself where that isn't part of my existence, but I don't really know specifically what that's going to look like. I'm as curious as you are to find out.
So I would say that it's very comforting that even accomplished people like you can are lost sometimes.
Well, we've come to the end of our hour. Sarah and Jon, I want to thank you first for your extraordinary public service and what you have done for all of us.